Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is October 3, 2023. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Also want to give a shout to Experiments in Cinema in New Mexico. That's where I met our guest today, Dane Benko. Where are you calling in from, Dane?
I am in Astoria, New York.
First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
My immediate thought just went to sleep.
That's a great answer. I never get that. Yeah, that's...
Are you sure no one else gave you that answer?
In
Ever?
40 years, I don't think I've gotten that answer. I mean, I try to remember, but it is a good answer. They're all good answers. It's just, the thing is best thought, first thought, everything will come around. But that was a good start. Okay, now what's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I prefer books and text.
Yeah.
Because I can read them at my own pace.
Yeah.
I can decide how quickly or slowly the information comes in, how much or how little attention I want to spend to it. It's actually quiet information. I don't do good with a lot of noise.
I love that. And did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to read, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
I don't really know. Reading has just been part of my life since I can remember. Yeah.
Why do you... Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like, I wanted to be a writer before I wanted to be a filmmaker.
Yeah.
It's a big part of my life in terms of how I conceive of art and stuff. I grew up without a television that was connected to like any sort of broadcast or cable or anything. We had a VHS player and then subsequently a DVD player. So for visual stories, I was used to movies, but I didn't really think that movies could tell as good stories as books could until I got to until I got to be a teenager and was watching like really weird, disturbing, like rated R thrillers and stuff that, taught me they could be a little bit cooler than I had previously expected. But yeah, like my brain is very text oriented, and if there's too much noise or if there's too much flashing light or if there's too much other stuff going on, I'm not going to be able to take it in as easily or as cleanly.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Ain't that at the root of anthropology? I actually just saw a meme roughly 20 minutes before I started this phone call with an old little, what do you call it, caveman chiseling some stuff into a rock. And he's like, we have to preserve everything because everything that we know can be transferred to subsequent generations to help improve their lives. And the other caveman says, what if we end up with so much information that they can't take it all in and they just start selectively choosing the information they get and to confirm their own reality rather than learn anything new? And the caveman's like, you shut your mouth. And I would have to say that the assumptions that the cartoonist made are honestly fair enough for where I am right now with that question. Like I know that you and I have had deeper conversations about this, but right now I'm okay taking things simply and just being like, we started writing things down to remember, and then things got a little out of hand.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into that. That's what I'm making a film on, about archiving, and you condense the film into a meme cartoon.
Yeah.
Beautifully well put. But the follow-up question is this need or want to collect information more innate in humans or more invented by humans?
Again, there's some argument that could be made that we became a Homo sapien once we started having that relationship with information. I would say invented or innate. I would say innate. I would say
Yeah.
our relationship with text and information is hybrid. That once we started using it, it changed the fundamental structure of our brain, so that our brain now relies on it to some degree. I think that's even true for people who are what's the term, illiterate.
Yeah.
I think there's still a character or uh, a symbolic representation way that their brain works that is based on how we receive and operate around information. And I think you can see that in things like the films of Nicholas Refn Wendig, who I'm under the impression was illiterate for a while, and learned a lot of his linguistics out of like cinema and cinematography. And his movies are incredibly symbols heavy, not just symbolic like representation or abstraction, but like he gets really fixated on things like the scorpion symbol on the back of the jacket, that he saw in Kenneth Anger films and then put into Drive, or in the Neon Demon, the flashing light is in like a triangle and stuff like that. Those things have a certain weight to them. I'm not like 100% certain on the on him having been illiterate at one point. I had read in American Cinematographer magazine something to that effect, but I had read that like 12 years ago, and I'm just like really worried about calling him out as having been illiterate, and then it turns out that that is like a
Oh, that's all right. But Dane, how do you spell Nicholas's last name?
Can I just look it up?
Oh, it's like W-I-N. Is that it? Win?
Windig, Refn Windig, or Windig.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
No, that was good. Yeah, and that's all right. This is what information is. We select information, then our memory deals with it. But this is perfect lead into the next question is,
sure.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Let's get into that one. I like that one. I would say oftentimes it's more the opposite. Emotions create thoughts. Definitely one thing that I have been really leaning into and focusing a lot on in the past few years actually is the false premise that our brain is our thoughts, or all of our thoughts are located in our brain, and that there's a bicameral reality of what we are as a person, that our brain is one half and then our body is another half, because a lot of that is just false. It's just incorrect. Our body thinks and feels and perceives, and there is a feedback loop. Our brain will tell our body things, our body will tell our brain things, and our brain would not actually even be able to fully structure its own thoughts if it didn't have the body to also handle some of that workload, do some of those processes and stuff. And yeah, I think that that idea that the brain is separate and specialized, or should be given a higher level of the idea of what thinking is than the body, is also tends to be a particularly westernized notion, a particularly technocratic notion, and one that is the reason why, for instance, there are some idiots out there that believe that AI art can in any way operate on the level that like a human made art can.
Yeah.
As just one example, that just comes from a lack of appreciation or understanding of body, and that's one of the reasons why I'm leaning further into body horror stuff right now in my own art. How people experience and feel things and perceive and receive and go through stories through all of their body rather than just, their brain and the things that
Yeah.
they have to say and the things that they think and the things that they say that they are thinking.
There's a bumper sticker on a car on my street that says, "Don't believe everything you think."
Yeah. which is a important thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've burned myself before on over reliance on the brain. But I have a kind of good story about that bicameral operand. Is that my brain's separateness from my body did actually save my life once, because I had an infection in my tonsil that had become a cyst and that had closed up my throat to the point where I couldn't even drink water. And my body's response to that was like, well, how do you deal with sickness? You go to sleep. You just sleep it off. It's fine. My body did everything it could, like literally everything it could, to tell my brain, like, look, it's fine. We'll just go into stasis mode, whatever. And it was my brain that was like analyzing that and going through and thinking about it and thinking ahead and said, no, if you go to sleep and you can't drink water, then you're not going to wake up. Like, you're going to have to actually, function, because we need to get to the hospital. And so I went to the hospital and got the tonsillar abscess drained, got a ton of care. I was in the hospital for like 18 hours. And so when my body and my brain do go in separate directions, it's actually a very profound experience. And because I recognize that, it's when they seem to be one thing, I also like keep in mind that means that there's something else, some different operation going on,
Yeah.
that I'm probably thinking as much with my body as with my brain. So when it's separate, that is when they're choosing to go, inform each other in a different way.
Yeah. Dane, and I welcome any anecdotes, stories like that. That was beautiful. I appreciate you saying that. And again, I appreciate how articulate you are and you taking your time. There's no rush here. Mm-hmm. This is a fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
think about it. I don't know what I think until actually, I'm just going to leave it there.
That's fine, because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. Mm-hmm. Can humans think without language?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's extremely difficult for people to describe how or why and like all the ways that they do. But first of all, you can see it that there's just a lot of ways in which people behave that isn't about how they think. And, that's very obvious. And then, there's plenty of practices for you to do things like that, such as meditation, drugs, any other thing. And also it's just, I don't know. To me, it's pretty obvious that there's lots of thinking that's not, lots of behaviors, lots of thinking, lots of stuff that's not language based. And that's a lot of the areas where you get into the, like, how language can't fully encompass all of reality or all of human experience and perception.
What Chomsky says, a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
My initial thought is that usually refers to conflict when there are language differences, not just between different languages, but like different ways people perceive the language of what you're saying. It is usually useful to say, okay, we can't talk about this now. We have to take a break. I actually really strongly recommend people get comfortable with their non-linguistic selves in some way, which I say that as a person who privileges books, who wanted to be a writer, who was
Yeah.
very text language based. One thing that I decided to do, my wife wanted to draw with me, and I was like, I don't know how to draw, and she was like, no, let's just draw. And so I started drawing, and I started really enjoying it. And it was one creative activity that I looked at and decided that I would never ever try to turn into like a hobby or monetize or like get better at. Like the goal of it is for me to never get better at it, to
Yeah.
just do it, because I just need something in my life that I can like not have to think
Yeah.
about and just do and perceive. So that's one example.
That was good. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Again, that's a false dichotomy because thinking and feeling are not two separate processes, but are almost always the same thing, and it's actually unusual um, or like it's usually a bad situation where there's one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing because 80% of people say we're more feeling beings. I love it when people say, hey, it's 50-50 or it's a false dichotomy because we can't separate feeling from thought, but we think we can because we invented the words.
Right. The
So
words
these
externalize the thoughts in a way that that you can't exactly print your feelings onto a page.
yeah.
Yep.
Two Turing questions from the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Yeah, I haven't landed on the existence of a soul yet, much to my wife's chagrin. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to keep working on that. I just can't. I can't land on it.
Yeah. Second Turing question, can machines think?
No, I did have a friend who wrote a very, very good series of stuff about how machines can be intelligent. And he is actually a friend. His name is Matt. I know him mostly online. Not the Matt that we know, it's a different one. I know a ton of Matts. Who he wanted to take on the concept of artificial intelligence, and so many people were saying that artificial intelligence can't be intelligence, but he was saying no, it can. But then he talked about the Western tradition, the Platonic ideology and stuff of prioritizing intellect over all other forms of um, sensation, appreciation, appropriation, all that kind of stuff, for how we are sense beings in the world.
Yeah.
And then he believes in a soul. So, philosophically, he's like, and all of that, if we focus exclusively on intellect, then that actually blinds us to our access to the soul, which is through truth and stuff. And then from there, he kind of started going into more Christian theology stuff, which is where I stopped reading because I got bored. Because again, that's just something that I can't land on. I don't have a I don't have a part of me that really needs any of that information. I read it and I like start getting in, like comprehending it, and then it's like, but none of this tracks with my own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, experiences, history, so on. So I just move on. But it was helpful because you again have that whole thing about is having a series of logic gates necessarily different than thinking? And if you focus exclusively on neuroscience, then you can make the claim that yes, a machine or a computer can think, because if you keep pulling up to enough levels of transmitters, you can eventually match at great scale and magnitude, and at the cost of probably more energy than all of the networked power supply that we currently have on planet Earth, but theoretically sometime in the future enough to match the amount of information, quote unquote, that's transacting through the neurons of a human brain. Even if you did that with a computer and the computer was thinking to that degree of abstraction, then it becomes a question of whether that thinking would be recognizable or translatable or even communicatable to human beings.
Yeah.
And that's an open question that I'm willing to leave to an open debate for other people to continue to discuss and philosophers to jump in on. I actually don't feel like saying no, it's impossible, or yes, it can happen.
Yeah.
I find both results to be completely interesting.
It's good, Dane. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Actually, right now, I more pursue happiness.
Yeah.
Comfort, domestic cozy, Venkatesh Rao stuff.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I'm going to go with creating it. I do believe in a physical reality beyond consciousness that exists whether we like it or not, whether we perceive it or not. I do have a kind of objective reality belief system, but I think that our consciousness was developed to enable us best to navigate the reality as a continuing, like we are a chemical reaction seeking more fuel to continue burning as long and as much as possible.
Yeah.
And our consciousness is what's the term? It's downstream of that. It's not the term that I wanted to say, but I'll
Yeah.
settle on that.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of light. Oh no, our thoughts are slow. We have a measurable, we have distinctly measurable lags between input and response. That's been shown over and over and over again. And the more text-based or language-based our thought is, the longer the response. Yeah.
Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded, said, "You can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest?
I think that question is kind of boring.
Well, it's sort of like what tool do you gravitate towards? Because, Frank Zappa had a great question. He said, "Who are the brain police?" So we
Yeah.
don't know who the master is. In
Hmm.
Audre Lorde being a poet, she's just saying it could be within yourself or some outside force or something else. And then,
That's the reason I find it boring.
yeah,
I'm definitely in New York City, where I'm surrounded by progressives, and I am from New Mexico, where I was surrounded by a bunch of like hippies, off the grid, like uh, libertarian types. You know, my entire life I've been surrounded by countercultural, you know, people and
yeah,
stuff, and I kind of go. What my response would be the Tool quote from Hooker with a Penis. Let me see if I can uh, relay it real quick. He says, I have some advice for you, little buddy. Before you point the finger, you should know that I'm the man, and you're the man, and she's the man, and he's the man as well, so you can point your fucking finger up your ass. There are elites that have outsized outsized control of resources, um, that you could say to a degree is unfair. And I agree. Like there's lots of ways in which we can always continue to sort society, but if you're always trying to take down the man or take down the master or all that kind of stuff, like you also are in your own way the man or the master, just someone else or some other level. And there's some way that you are integrated into everything. And so I don't know it,
no,
like,
that's good, Dane. It
yeah.
reminds me of the Warhol quote that I never get to repeat anymore, and I just remembered it recently. There's nothing more bourgeois than dissing the bourgeois.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that happens too, which I
Yeah,
find pretty funny. But in the I always want to be a little careful about it, because there are people who have had real trauma and suffering and conflicts, in those ways that I find really meaningful. And I have more than a few friends that are legit on the ground actual activists trying to make change in the world. So I'm always into change.
yeah,
I'm always into like what can we do? But I'm not. I'm into policy over politics, and I'm into ideas over ideology. So I just have a really hard time with the things that are like, oh yeah, and in the end, like once we tear down the bad guys and take control of the system, it'll be better. It's like, no, once you take control of the system, you're just going to be the new bad guy.
yeah. No, I get your point. It's very clear, and I agree in a lot of ways. What new toy do you suggest?
Toy, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. um Very into puzzles right now. Just old fashioned jigsaw puzzles. Sit your ass down, do nothing for a week.
Yeah,
um Highly recommended, highly recommended.
it's good.
Yeah. uh uh yeah, any of the old toys, all of the old toys, things that you can do with your hands.
It's good.
Yeah, play.
What do you what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
um I don't really worry a lot when I go to bed anymore. Actually, I
Smart.
don't think I really have much. I used to. No, no, I don't. Actually, my wife could tell you, she gets a little annoyed with me because she has all these worries for the future and stuff, and so she'll tell them to me. I'll just be like, okay, cool, we'll work it out, and then I just conk right out, and go to sleep. Yeah. And I actually want to say that, like, for instance, this last week I had some extremely major expensive setbacks on a film project that I'm working on, and it was really distressing. And it was bad enough that I got like a major tension headache and everything. And even then, like, I didn't. it didn't keep me up at night. I'm not about that scene.
Good.
You know, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Dane, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Could you do all of that again? I liked what I was hearing, and
it's sort of like there's these hidden psychic effects that our inventions cause, and we're not that aware of them. We just embrace Zoom or we embrace the invention, and we don't understand how it really shapes our behavior. So McLuhan learned from Pound that artists sort of broadcast the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might know how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. And so why, Marshall's main thing is, why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Okay. I don't think that, quote unquote, we ignore.
Yeah.
You know, being as a good example, being a digital native on the internet, you know, elder, millennial, whatever you want to call it, someone who used the 56K dial-up to chat on IRC and you know, do GeoCities all the way through, you know, the invention of social media sites, or I guess invention, I don't know, crystallization of them, all that kind of stuff, to now where, for instance, I'm actually starting to download some stuff off of my Facebook and stuff because I'm going to close that down, all that kind of thing. I mean, people were discussing, debating, conversing, reacting, and overall documenting the process of what this shit was doing to us as we were going along.
Yeah.
And I even would sometimes ignore that stuff on purpose, hear people saying like, oh, this is going to be a problem in these ways or whatever, and me be just like, okay, well, that's one person's opinion. But it wasn't ignoring it to the degree of being surprised when it turned out that they were right in many ways. Like once they turned out to be right in many ways, I was like, well, too bad. I was hoping they were wrong, but hey, they did call it. I am prepared for this, you know. And I don't necessarily, I don't know. There are people who get surprised in that sort of way, for instance, about like, I don't know, I don't want to call out any specific event, but like, let's say everything that happened from like 2020 to now regarding kind of the fallout of everything occurring around politics, the pandemic, work from home, you know, real estate, like office real estate, like all these fallouts, all these things. There are some people who are surprised, but they are the type of people who choose surprise as their way of reacting and dealing with the world.
Yeah.
You know, like if you don't want to be surprised, you'll never be surprised. There are people, it's just, it's the same emotional thought thing. It's the way their bodies process information is surprise. You know, I don't think that, I think humans are so big on documenting everything that they do that they do document all of their concerns as they do it. And I don't think that's necessarily just the area for the artists to do. And when you think about things like Silicon Valley, creating, art generators without talking to artists, and you have Sam Bankman-Fried is on the record as saying that reading a book is a mistake. Spending any time reading a book is a waste of time, and all that kind of stuff. He said that, right? He's just like, it's it's completely against like anything purposeful, meaningful, or whatever. You can claim that those people haven't been introduced, or don't have enough artists in their lives to be able to communicate with them the importance of art and all that kind of stuff. But that's just not true. They've just chosen in their own heads, through some process or another, through some evaluation or another, whatever has gone on in their lives, they've chosen to devalue that as a goal or a principle. And no amount of artists saying, well, actually, we're trying to give you an early alert system so that you don't end up in prison for running, a complete Ponzi scheme out of a shell in the Bahamas, which is going to catch up with you. They've already chosen not to listen to that early response. They've turned off that alert on their cell phone. So it's,
Yeah. Well, Dane, you actually anticipated a little delve into this word archive. Etymologically, it comes from keep safe, free from harm, and then records or documents preserved as evidence, which you said earlier, those very words. The Greek root word etymologically is like town hall, public building, to be first, Archon, the first ruler, the chief magistrate. So is this need or want to collect and preserve an archive more innate or more invented? The Egyptians would put stuff in their coffin with them. And there's also the Eastern philosophy that goes, be here now, live in the moment. Why do we have to or are driven to worry about our past and our past things when maybe the point is to live in the moment? I'm not trying to color your answer, but just it's a big picture of this need or want to archive.
Sure. Well, when you write something down, you've already created an archive. Whether you keep it or not is up to you. But if you've written it down, why would you write something down if you're not preserving it? Like the act of writing in the first place is the act of preserving a thought or recording a transaction or all that kind of stuff. So it's the same answer as I gave before about is language innate or invented. It's both. As soon as we started doing it, our brains started requiring it, and it's a cyborg relationship we have with
cyborg relationship. But that's good. But it goes back to your wife encouraging you to draw just sort of for the sake of drawing and enjoy it,
which is still archiving. It's still symbolic,
right? But do you save everything you draw?
I don't know. Probably.
Yeah.
That to me is, I mean, we do have all of our drawings up on the shelves, but I don't think that that's necessarily there for us to look through again. It's just because we still have empty pages left, and once we're done with the notebooks, we might get rid of them. I'll have to ask her if she wants to say.
Wait. Yeah, I missed that. We do get rid of them once the books, or you?
We haven't finished up a notebook yet.
You haven't finished a notebook.
Yeah.
But this is very interesting because
this is a great question.
Starting as a writer and then becoming the filmmaker you are, have you saved all your stuff? Do you have boxes of all your stuff in a storage? And do you have a plan to donate them to a museum? Or, we were talking about Brian Konevsky
Yeah.
in Mexico, the Basement Films
Mhm.
archive of found footage and educational films. This need or want of your own stuff. Do you have any plans of your own history?
Yeah.
And is it archived? Yeah.
Yeah. I try to keep digital copies and backups of everything that I work on or stuff. I've actually relaxed a lot on that in recent years of letting things go. But I try to. I actually, the funny thing is that I have worked in film for going on 12, 13 years or so. And I've always needed a website, and I've never had a website. And I finally built a website this last year for the first time. And it's still not done. It works fine as just something to send out, like here's the work I do, whatever. But the long-term goal of it is for that website to be another copy of all my stuff, a secondary archive that I can retrieve. And I learned that from a artist you may be interested in named Ganzier.
Yeah.
He's
How do you spell that?
Ganzeer.
Okay. And what did you
He
learn from him?
he is a graphic artist and a protest artist. He was actually very involved in the Arab Spring in Egypt. And his website, he said one day on his newsletter, he has a newsletter, and he said that his website only a very small percentage of his website is actually visible to the public. The rest of it is his like a backup storage of a lot of his stuff. And this is particularly because so much of his work is ephemeral.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, in the case of protest art, it has to be. It has to be put in a place where it doesn't belong, and he knows it'll get torn down. That he needs and that makes it also really difficult to track. So he'll take pictures of it or do some sort of recording, or he'll save the materials for his workshop, or he'll do whatever, and he'll put it on his website so he can track it down and find it again later. Because otherwise, just keeping track of all the stuff that he's done is too much work.
But do you have any feelings on like archive.org? Everything that goes up online, they store in the Wayback Machine.
Mm-hmm.
So even if a government takes down your website, it's stored there. And then the whole dilemma: will archive.org and or YouTube, listed, unlisted, or public or not public, ever be turned off?
Right. That's always an issue, always, with all archives. I mean, there are libraries that burn. Hold on a second. Let me get my cat so she won't yell through this whole thing. She just needs attention. There are public libraries and there are private libraries. The risk of a private library is that the individual will, or the private individuals that own it will die and let it go, or will lock it away so it can never be retained or received. The issues with the public library are that they can be defunded, shut down, and the issues with any library is that they can be burned. The issue with archive.org is that I don't know how much longer it will last. I'm kind of in investment and trading terms, I'm kind of short archive.org sustainability. I like it. I appreciate it. I want it to survive as long as possible. I give money to it for it to succeed. But it's too big of an endeavor against too many agents operating against it.
Yeah.
I think the same is true of Wikipedia. I think their
Really?
days are limited.
Wow. So a professional archivist told me, everybody says I store on hard drives.
Mm-hmm.
She told me, do you check your hard drive every year and replace it or migrate the medium every 7 years? Your feelings on hard drives longevity.
Yeah. I back up my computer once a year onto I back up my computer once a year. I fill up hard drives however fast they fill up. Honestly, you would think that I would use a ton of them, but I don't actually. And then I feel like every 5 years or so I do a mass checkup and backup. And there has absolutely been cases where things have gone missing. You know, things have decayed or fallen. There's only so much you can do to preserve things, but I do my best in what I would consider a prosumer way. If I was in charge of it as like, if I was charge of it professionally in any way, or if I had a more existential need for everything to be preserved to the most updated thing, I could absolutely do more and know how to do more. But again, there's a certain degree to which you also just have to let things go.
Dane, back to this. Thank you for that. Back to the artist as antenna of the race. Do artists have moral obligation?
I would say that's a truism of sorts. I think artists operate out of a moral obligation whether they want to or not. I would advise artists to think about what their moral obligations are and really be considerate of it. But some artists, won't be. And so they'll operate out of their own sense of morality just without self-reflection on it.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid of ideas.
Beautiful. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah, earliest memories. Yeah. One of the earliest memories is when I was 2 years old, my family moved from the house that they were living in to a new property, and they put us in a trailer while they built the new house. The house that my mother is currently living in and has been living in for 35 years. And so while we were in the trailer, I have a memory of there was a partition between the front of the trailer and the back of the trailer. And my sister and I slept in the back of it while my mother and father slept in the front of it. And so my mother and father were awake and doing something, I don't know what, but they had the light on. And I went up to the barrier and there was little holes poked in the barrier, just as like a pattern or whatever. Yeah. And I was looking at the light through the holes and seeing how much I could see through the barrier. And my sister said, Dane, it's bedtime. You need to come to bed. And I was like, but I could see the light through the barriers or something like that. I actually don't even remember if I was talking, but she understood. She understood what I was trying to do. Wow. And so she kind of pulled me back and she said, if you want to look at the light, look at the Care Bear lamp. And so I looked and I watched the Care Bear lamp until I fell asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Again, I wouldn't really call it either, but I'd lean towards blessing. I don't really see why memory, even like I have, traumatic memories and stuff, and I would rather have them than not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, I'm going to go with blessing because there are distinct things that I don't remember that people have told me about. Speaking about trauma, I was in a abusive relationship once, and people were telling me stories of phone calls I would make to them and stuff, where they would hear things that were happening, and I don't remember them happening, and it freaks me out more that I don't remember them happening than the fact that they happened. I'm really displeased about that. That's a kind of thing that freaks me out about my brain. Like I don't like not remembering things.
Well, I appreciate your honesty and being articulate, Dane. This one's about, tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Well, I just like to think that I'm a good personality hybrid of my mother and my father, because my mother was all about, let's sit down and talk it through and we'll figure it out. And my father was all about, fuck it. It'll be all right. Yeah. And so that's where I go with that. Outside my family, I'm gonna go with a historical figure that I'm really into. I actually don't fully know how to pronounce his name, but it's Sir Harold Gillies.
Yeah.
He is a British. He was a British surgeon. He was originally born in New Zealand, but he founded the like Royal Queen's Hospital during World War I in order to research and develop how to fix soldiers' faces when they were coming back from the front lines. And he strongly believed that a person's agency, identity, and their welfare as a human being was intimately connected with their face, that their face should represent who they are as a person, who they believe themselves to be. And so he took the best research that he could from around the world. He traveled to India, he traveled to France, he traveled all around the world, and he collected the best plastic surgeons he could find, and he developed most of the contemporary plastic surgery techniques like skin grafts and stuff that are used today. He also then, after the war, needed money, and so he did vanity surgeries for celebrities, and then he did the first transgendered surgeries in the UK. And he even lobbied to make male to female surgery legal, because at the time it was illegal, because there was a rule in the book that a surgeon could not medically destroy a penis unless it was a life-threatening situation. Wow. And so he argued that a person's welfare and identity is connected with what their face represents and what their body represents. And so it's counted, it would be an existential death if he didn't have the permission. He was also a draftsman and drew his surgeries and sketched them. And he was a practical joker and loved to like tell jokes and stuff to keep his patients happy. And he would greet every single patient for the first time by looking them in the eye and saying, don't worry, you'll have a better face than you've ever had once I'm done with you. So he was very humanistic and interpersonal. So
Yeah.
he's my hero in many ways. Smart, intelligent, creative, innovative, humanistic, interpersonal, all that kind of stuff. In a
Yeah.
lot of ways, he's, literally a better person and personality than I could push myself to be. But yeah, I take a lot of, he's one of my favorite people to think about.
Dude, I appreciate you teaching me about him. I'm going to look into him more. Did
Yeah.
your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, they tried to be pretty open about whichever, like see which way things would go. And they actually even had me in a Catholic daycare for a while.
Yeah.
But my father was a recovering Catholic, and my mother was kind of a New Age spiritualist. So they just like weren't into it, and yeah, so I just didn't grow up religious or spiritual.
Do you pray?
No.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
If God exists, I don't think there will be conversation. I think there will be something, I guess you could say, about transcendentalism or communion.
Yeah.
You know, I can see some sort of the various beliefs where you know, your consciousness moves into a different level or a different layer or
Yeah.
whatever, and you just become whatever the next thing is. I'm
Yeah.
cool with that, but yeah, I don't see why any of that would be text based or linguistic.
Or linguistic, yeah.
Yeah,
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
yeah. I'm gonna open up the curtain so I have a little bit more light, real quick. Think about that, because yeah, I'm trying to think about evil lately.
No worries.
Okay. Anyway,
Good.
we're still connected. Everything's good.
Yep. Good.
Okay.
Better lighting now too. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Evil. Evil. Lots of Eye of the Beholder stuff. Um, you 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 can't operate in the world without having impact on others, and some of those are going to be negative in ways that you're just going to be unable to prevent, or correct or apologize for. But there is excuse me, sorry, there is psychosis. There is what's it called? Man, what is the term?
Neurotic.
Sociopathy. There's
Oh,
sociopathy.
sociopathic. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there is sociopathy, and I would say, as best as I can define evil, it's just the sociopathic tendency in human beings. We all have to some degree, to harm someone else for our own advantage. And I don't want to say that like, oh, we're all, it's just, to some degree.
Yeah.
And people suppress it through morals, through logic, through empathy, or through their own emotions, or they counteract it with something else, or they justify it, or whatever, and some people are just full-on sociopaths.
Well, the hidden question really is, Dane, How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Mm-hmm.
JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. A basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Alan Watts is a pretty good starting place. I mean, there's going to be some people who won't let you get away, but you still have to find a way out if you can. But yeah, like, I don't think it's a good idea to bother to have any enemies. You either have people who help you and support you. You help and support people who are aligned with you and do what you can, or you just let go of other people and you don't get involved with them. You don't join any games. You don't do any competition. You don't do any collaboration. Um, there is some risks to avoidance. Avoidance isn't the only conflict resolution measure, but most things it's just like I actually did have there was a kid in like middle school, high school era of my life who one day I kind of like realized he really did not like me. I don't know why, and I don't really care. He really didn't like me. And I realized that any time that I was doing anything or like with other people around him or with him or whatever, he was either insulting me or he was doing something to like uh to mess with my reputation with other people, all that kind of stuff. And it was interesting that even at that age, I just was kind of like, oh, wow, there's a kid who doesn't like me. All right, I guess I'll just not deal with him. And then I just never dealt with him again.
Wow, because this is funny. You must have ESP. Nassim Taleb said games were created to give non heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Then someone said, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist, says if a criminal gets caught, does he go, wow, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, whoa, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
Yes. Um, but with context.
Yeah.
I mean, you punishment works, but there has to be a way to move forward, or else it won't. I'm trying to think about what I mean, how to express that, because yeah, this is one of those areas where I'm talking about thinking, logic, words, and so on. My brain is like, oh, I know this, and then my words are like, but what are the words? Okay. So the thing is that you have to punish to the scope of the crime, but you also have to provide a pathway for the person to do better and improve. And then you have to be willing to do it again if they're a recidivist and keep doing it, as many times as it takes, even if it takes their whole lives, and they end up in like life in prison or whatever. The punishment is really a lot about, like, I don't think there is justice, and I don't think that there is closure by going as far as something like, let's say someone kills someone. It doesn't make sense to then kill them. And obviously there's literally nothing that you can do to punish that person that will bring that other person back, make a recompense, or really even apologize to the loved ones of whom he's killed. But killing him isn't going to solve any problems. It's not going to reduce murders. It's not going to deter crime. And you still have that person, and he still owes society something. So the question is, how can you punish him and him or her? How can you punish that person and give them something so that they can choose to try to make up for their crime?
Yeah. And
that sounds all very lovey-dovey and wishy-washy, but I actually think that's a very technical thing, also about justice in general. And the fact that if you set up any system where people will only be punished if they do anything, especially if they've done any crime, like a crime, and there is no way for them to move forward at all, if they know for a fact that once they've committed that crime, there is no other option, then they are more likely to like actually lash out and attack and cause more problems and be more violent, because they know that there's nothing left to do but to fight to the death. You know, they are cornered existentially, and they're only going to cause more problems. It's going to be very expensive. It's going to cause more damage. And it's just not the smartest way to handle anything.
Yeah.
Great. Wait. I have a follow-up question on this, though, because we're talking about archives, we're talking about these things. Where does punishment come in this? In this, why are you asking about punishment?
Well, because is evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle? What do you do with your enemy? And then this whole idea of, if there is an enemy, is that something that entails a need to reform? Or like, I mean, I was happy that you said you're not for capital punishment, or, you know, touched on that. And so it's really around that Nassim Taleb quote, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't really know who wins or loses, but
I disagree with that. Actually,
yeah, that's good. You can reflect on that too, because that sort of implies this, you know, old Joseph Campbell hero and all that. So go ahead.
Yeah. So you kept giving these quotes, and all these different quotes I had like different responses or reactions to, and then you went into punishment. I was like, what? So like, no, games are not to give losers the illusion of winning. That's so dumb. Like, games are for a lot of things. They're for fun. They're for play, which is different than fun, you know, for exploration, for, you know, development, learning, having, you know, a sandbox to, you know, learning about consequences, doing things like that. Like with sports are games. Sports are also really good for your health, for like your body, learning, you know, to think with your body and learning to react with your body. There are competitive games, but there are collaborative games. There are, you know, solitaire games, all that kind of stuff. It's like so complex. And then, yes, you also, you jumped in with deriding the Joseph Campbell hero story thing. But yeah, the Joseph Campbell hero story thing is also kind of a conservative notion of you know, the hero, the human being, largely the man, after he has taken control of the narrative and gone through all of the processes that has given him the privilege and enabled him, and given him the resources and stuff to take control, then crafts the world, changes the world in his own image, and it's the great man of history kind of stuff, and so on. It's funny that Joseph Campbell was actually coming at it from this more new age cross cultural study of like, oh, look at how connected and how similar we all are and stuff. But it's been very much appropriated by this concept that when taken to its extreme, which I understand that any concept taken to extreme can become problematic, but to its extreme is fascist and totalitarian, you know, and it's, and the idea that games are about the winners or the losers is a fundamental misunderstanding of games and game making. And yeah, I have a friend who makes games, and we talk about things about this a lot, and it's a really important thing for me. So like, yeah, like disabusing the notion that games are about winning or losing or winners or losers is a really important thing for me.
Yeah, and what I really appreciate, Dane, is that you listen. You know, I throw out a lot of these quotes just as prompts, and it really gets down to the question. And when people really go back and listen, I appreciate that. And it is just prompts, because it's not that so much I'm looking for an answer. I'm looking for you to voice some thoughts and ideas, and it's sort of like an airing, or an airing of ideas, so that we can play off of. And it's sort of like me and you versus the wording on the question. So when people listen closely, well, that's a false dichotomy. Or like one of my favorites was when I says, is it more this or more that? And this woman says, the word more doesn't function in your question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Which I welcome that. But it is great that you were listening, because, you know, I didn't mean to deride Campbell as much as Campbell has a lot to offer. And, you know, trying to figure out Finnegan's Wake 4 years after it came out was quite aspiration. But, you know, in Joyce's words in The Wake, he said, first we fall, then we feel. And I think that's what Campbell got a lot from being a Finnegan's Wake freak, is that humans fail, they fall, then they get back up. So it's this question of redemption or reformation, like you were saying about the punishment. So it is good when people talk to me about, well, why did you ask that question after that question? No one ever does that. They just hear me do the questions. And it's rare that they go back and say, well, why did you ask that question? So I appreciate that. That helps me a lot. Yeah.
There was a second quote after the Campbell quote that you gave that I also had a reaction to.
Yeah, that was a friend reacting to the Nassim Taleb quote. He said, villains don't think they're bad, they want control. Heroes want freedom. And then I said the third one was Gregory Bateson. When the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff? Or does he go, wow, I did something morally and socially wrong?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The control was a really good concept out of that. That's actually part of the punishment thing, isn't it? Too much of what we conceive as punishment is trying to control the behavior of somebody who did something out of our control. And of course, like, obviously that's not that's not a useful way to go about it. And yeah, generally speaking, it's actually really funny that the word control has come up a lot in the production of this movie that I've been working on.
Yeah.
And like I was talking to this one director about it, and he's like, oh man, and you know, the thing about me is I need a lot more control over things. And I was like, nope, like red flag, you know,
Yeah.
like out. I've been really again, I've been really kind of not enjoying um the concept of directorial control as it's presented often in filmmaking.
Yeah.
Like I've learned over time, that's a real red flag if someone is like really into Kubrick and like you know how he would fire a PA if the PA was holding a magazine upside down. I'm like, that is not appropriate behavior. It doesn't matter how smart or good he was as an artist. That still, he could have
Yeah.
made just as good of a movie. The
Yeah.
movie would have been just as good, but he's
Yeah.
still a dick, you know, kind of thing. And that this came to a head because I was having and no names because this is
Yeah.
happening right now and I don't want to, but I'm not even going to say which department the person
Yeah.
was working in. But I was having a conversation with someone in my crew, and they were like really struggling with something, and finally they were like, okay, I just have to like let go and stop trying to control this. You know, I usually like to have more control over all this kind of stuff. And as soon as I like heard that, I was like, oh my God, if you had just said in the first place that the issue was control, we could have gotten way past this issue a long time ago by saying, listen, this is not the sort of production where we're going to have that amount of control, because we can't. We don't have the resources, we don't have the money, we don't have the time to have control over things to the level that you are used to in a higher level film. You know, like if it was about control, we could have like gotten past this weeks ago.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So control has been a really big thing lately. On the flip side,
Yeah.
I also, you know, I've had a couple of times when my producers have been like, you need to take more control of the situation because you're the fucking director. You're supposed to
Yeah.
step in and say what is what. And I've redirected that input by saying, no, I'm not going to take control, but I am going to give better direction. I'm going to say,
There you go.
yeah, go this direction, go that direction. I'm not going to control how you get there. Just, yeah, it's a big deal for me right now. This is a big thing in my life.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that word, especially because I fly through that Nassim Taleb quote into the other ones, and then I just punch them with the punishment.
Nassim Taleb is a very interesting person because I actually enjoy reading some of his stuff. I do find it interesting. And then he's one of those people, what's the term? He's not wrong.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about being right. And he's not necessarily, he comes to the right conclusions about a lot of things through like the wrong means, or he has the right information but then comes to like a really wacky conclusion that you can still use, but it's just like, okay, man. Yeah, he's not even wrong. That's the full term. That's what it's
Not
called.
even. Yeah.
Not even wrong. Yeah. It's,
you know, it's funny because I could do a lot of my quotes as it's been said, and then the issue of who said it.
yeah.
You know, but anyways, I'm glad you're a good listener and articulate, Dane. And I asked for 90 minutes. We got 10 more minutes. So what I'm hoping is we could do a part 2 down the line, because we only got through about 12 of the questions, and we usually try for 40. But I wanted to, yeah, well, I want to talk about control for a second, because I worked for George Carlin for a half a year, and it was really fun because we got this flyer in the mail. I mean, he didn't even say this. It goes, I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity. And it's just such a funny, you know, go to humor and laughs when we're trying to, you know, suss out the bigger picture here, like be comprehensive, because the word control is just like going back to like joke telling, Jack Benny is being robbed, and the guy goes, your money or your life, and Jack goes, let me think about that.
Yeah.
So the guy with the gun has the control, but then Jack flips it to like, hey, wait, we got to pause here.
Yeah.
So, back to James Joyce, he was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He checked out. He basically said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism.
Yeah.
Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, because if you consider the workflow of what a movie is, you start with absolute infinity options of what it could be. Literally anything you can imagine. Absolutely any possible thing. You select from that infinity the things you most want to see, and you write them down into a script. You then, from that script, figure out what's feasible and possible to shoot technically and craft around that. You get what footage you can with the resources you have. You give that footage to an editor that puts them in the best possible arrangement of things to fully express the overall idea of the creation. And then you find the best possible distributor to platform it so that the audience that you actually want will see it and relate to it as closely to your original vision as possible. Every step of the way, you're framing out every single other option. And so the reason why you go into a movie theater to see a tree is to see that tree, not whatever individual tree you see outside. And as a person who has spent at this point 6 or 7 years maybe taking pictures of buildings around New York City, and just taking pictures of buildings and posting them to my Instagram, like, those buildings are there for everyone to see. They're not, I don't even typically choose the buildings that have historical relevance or anything. I just literally see a building and I'm like, that's interesting, and take a picture of it. And all I'm saying is, like, look at this building right now, this single moment of this building. It's not about the building just existing for anybody to walk by. It's about me telling somebody to look at it.
Yeah. Well, that's funny, Dane, because a screenwriting teacher told me great art, great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Bringing up Kubrick again, he says great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play when you're making a Dane film?
Yeah, I mean, I'm only going to make things I'm interested in making, so that's one thing. I'm sorry, I have to get more light again.
Yeah.
I can... Don't want to go all skinamarink on you. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah. So the thing is that I have my own, reasons I want to tell a story about something or whatever. I have learned, or not learned. I do hold the thing that, after the thing is done and sent out in the world, I know that other people might not understand it the way that I intend, or their own intentions will come in and they'll have their own readings of it. So you kind of have to let go of your intention.
Yeah.
And I've actually kind of started like I have actually not really spent a lot of time with movies that I like or art that I like. I've not spent a lot of time trying to find the intention of the artist behind it. I usually just kind of like get my own thing out of it and roll with it, you know. Like maybe the artist intended this, but I got this out of it, so that's what I'm going to take. So yeah, I would say that intention in my art is a loose role. It's a driving force in why I make it, but it's not a driving force in what I want the final product to be. I just want the final product to be done and for people to pay for it.
That's good. Well,
fundamentally, I just want people to pay me for my art so I can just make more.
To make more. That's amazing. That's Warhol said the great line I love is, don't worry about what people think of your art, just keep making it. But
yeah.
you know,
well,
this
and
is
Ray Bradbury, I'm gonna
go ahead. Yeah.
Actually, no, I don't know if it was Ray Bradbury. I'm now blanking. It might be another one of those science fiction short form writers.
Yeah.
Oh man, it is a different one. It's not Ray Bradbury, but I don't remember the guy. Anyway, he says, you know, the rules of writing are you have to finish the story, you have to put it in the market, and you don't take it out of the market until it's sold. And then you just do the next. Yeah, I'll have to track down who that was for you.
Yeah. Bring it up in part 2, which can be down the line. But what you really evoked there was one, Jay Rosenblatt made a lot of great films. And I said to him, I asked him all these questions, and I said, how did Sans Soleil by Chris Marker influence you? Because it was evident.
Yeah.
And he says, it's how I imagined he made it. It wasn't like I studied all the interviews and this is what he said, how he made it. He didn't want to know how Chris made it. He wanted to know how he could come up in his own imagination how he made it.
Well, you know, it's
that was beautiful. Go ahead.
You know, what's really interesting about that is Sans Soleil is a huge influence in my work as well. And I started making all these, what I call ambient narrative films, where I'll just like shoot things, static camera or whatever, and then I'll have a narrator tell a story over it. But mine are like science fiction-y, horror-ish kind of stuff. They're definitely fictional, right? They're not so documentary or philosophical as Chris Marker's, which of course, you know, I know Chris Marker himself was, it's also science fiction. It's also speculative, but it's, you know, but it's just not, it's not as like documentary journalistic based. And I kept doing this over and over and over again and being like, you know, somewhere along the line, someone's going to call me out and be like, that's not how Chris Marker, that's not the point of what Mr. Chris Marker was doing. Like, he's talking about the world and you're just making shit up kind of thing. But then here's a funny thing. I have recently seen the first 2 feature films of David Cronenberg.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge Cronenberg fan, but I'd never seen these first 2 films. They are Crimes of the Future, the 1970 one. He made a new movie with that same title recently, but it's a completely different story, completely different setup. And Stereo. And both of these movies, he just got a few actors to kind of like walk around what looked like, obviously an institutional space. I'm pretty sure it's just the college that David Cronenberg was in, while the college was like shut down during weekends or breaks or whatever. And he just has these people, just like figures walking around, and then these voiceover narrative telling a story about like all the weird scientific shit that they're doing and like the weird horror stuff. And so I like thought this whole time that I was taking Chris Marker and purposefully doing it wrong to do my own thing. And then I found out that I was just replicating what Cronenberg had already done in the 70s, you know,
which you hadn't seen.
Yeah, that I hadn't seen. Yeah, it was actually really funny.
It's called, Dane, it's called effects precede causes.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's the second time this has happened. The first time I actually did a short film with a guy who falls in love with his operating system.
Oh yeah.
And I had just finished it and shown it to friends, and then like a week later, the trailer for Her, Spike Jonze's Her, landed, and I was just like, and there, I was of a mixed mind. There was the half of me that was like, "Ha, see, I'm in the zeitgeist,
Right,
I'm doing it right."
right.
Like, you know, and then there was the other half that was like, "Ah, shit, I can't compete against Spike Jonze." You know.
That's
same
funny.
thing with Cronenberg. I'm like, hooray! Like if Cronenberg was on the same level, then I fucking know that I'm doing the right thing. But then on the other hand, shit, now that I've seen it, this is just a bunch of Cronenberg shit, you know, that I've made. It's not my shit.
But Dane, it's like Pascal, the philosopher mathematician. He said, in order to understand anything, you have to know this end of the spectrum and that end and everything in between. So you're a comprehensivist. You're seeing the big picture, and that's what's important, because of course you could, you know, look at it different ways.
Right.
So I really appreciate your time and energy today, Dane. I learned a lot. I look forward to part 2 down the line, and I'll send you some dates if you're interested, and we'll go at it again. This has really been fun, and thank you so much.
Okay, cool. And where do you post this again? Like where
it's on it as soon as it ends, it's on YouTube under the channel I'm Probably Wrong About Everything.
Okay. Got it.
But I'll send you the link in the next day. I'll send you the link and some proposed dates.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dane.
Thank you. It was good.
Really appreciate it.
As always. Yeah.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you later.